welcome to the Knock Knock Episode 1 Q&A. My name is Jason B. Jones, and I'm here with my brother and our communications director, Simon Jones. Simon, first of all, thank you so much for all you're doing to help the mission of this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Simon, tell me a little bit. I mean, you had a chance to listen to episode 1. We drove around in the car and listened to an early edit. Tell me, what was your thought about episode 1?
Pretty gripping, man. I can't say it brought back a lot of memories, but it kind of did give me some insight to a part of my childhood I can't necessarily remember, but it happened nonetheless, and it certainly has affected my life ever since. And it surprised me in ways I didn't really think it would. Hearing some of the interviews of our family members and the things that they said, and kind of framed against the obituary and some of the news reports, it just really brought everything together in a new light and kind of a new perspective that I'd never really thought of it or certainly never seen or heard it before.
Right. I almost felt like it was an ability to do like a diary for that. You know, it was something where we had like a time capsule of those moments in our childhood.
Yeah.
From, and one of the things I mentioned in the podcast is that's just not something that we grew up talking about.
No, it really wasn't. It was kind of like you put it was almost taboo. That we all knew it happened. It wasn't like a secret, but you just didn't talk about it because there was no answer, there was no resolution, and there was really only pain.
Right.
And no one really wanted to talk about how much it hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that there's some freedom in it. I mean, some of the things we've talked about is that I think our natural human tendency is to take things that are painful and to bury them deep down.
Yeah.
And I think that there's some freedom in just having those conversations and being really true and transparent about them.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely.
Yeah, man. So have you been surprised with the early engagement of this community that we've built?
Yeah, I really have. We've really seen a lot of people reach out publicly and privately to express their condolences. People are asking questions. People are definitely sharing it and spreading Betty's and Catherine's story. And yeah, it's been really encouraging. It's been uplifting. It's been surprising at times. Really been kind of touched by how many people are caring about their story and about what we're trying to do.
I think it's also really great how people local to Starkville, especially the media outlets around there, the Reflector, the Starkville Daily News, have been interested in retelling this story to their readers and their listeners.
Yeah, definitely. The news attention, I think people are going to pay maybe more attention to it in Starkville. Because it hits close to home, and it's part of the local news, and I'm sure the people there know of Betty or know of her influence, know of the tragic circumstance around it, even though it was so many years ago, and to see that, people are still talking about this, this is coming up again, I think it really gets their attention.
Yeah, well, so let's, why don't we jump into some questions from the Knock Knock community?
Definitely.
Hey, Jason, this is Quasi from Las Vegas, and first I want to express my thoughts to you and your family and the family of Catherine as well, too. My question for you is this. The title states The Unsolved Murders of Betty Jones and Catherine Krigler. After listening, was Catherine's death the result of the attack? Your dad mentioned that he spoke to her in the hospital about forgiving her, that she was not responsible for anything, and that she later then passed away. I didn't know if you might get into that in future episodes or not. Again, congratulations on what you're doing and bringing us the story of Betty and Catherine, and I do hope that this finds you justice. Again, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, and Catherine passed away a couple of months after the actual crime. And so what was amazing about that is that she was able to speak with authorities and give a description of the perpetrator. And so they were able to do a rape kit on Catherine because she was raped and brutally assaulted, extremely injured. And she succumbed to those injuries. It just took a while. And emotionally, I thought it was really interesting when Dad told that story about offering forgiveness to Catherine. And I've spoken with Catherine's granddaughter and Catherine's son and daughter-in-law, and she just held a lot of guilt. And it wasn't reasonable guilt, but she mentioned that if Betty had passed away, that she didn't want to be alive either. And so there was a level of guilt because, Betty was there taking care of Catherine. Catherine had, and we're going to get into this in depth. We have an episode that's completely dedicated towards Catherine and talking about her life and the circumstances. But to make the story really short is that she had a recent surgery, and she had a caretaker that had gone away for a family reunion, and Betty had graciously offered to come and stay with Catherine. And so I think that there was a level of guilt that she had to be taken care of, and that put Betty in harm's way. And so her death is ruled as a homicide, so that's why it's the unsolved murders of both Betty and Catherine.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Nathan. I'm from Traverse City, Michigan. I'm currently looking into my hometown and deeper than just the news reports. How you dug deeper, the way you research things, how you approach people, as well as how you kept it all documented and in order. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I learned really early on that the best way to get information was twofold. One is I went and I connected with someone at the local university to start to dig into the newspaper archives. It's this guy named Ben, and he was so helpful. We talked about this in the pre-production diaries, but I reached out on the local Craigslist to Starkville and Oktibbeha County and said, hey, if there's anyone that would like to do some research for me, I think I ended up paying him, something, he's worth more than I paid him.
Right.
But he started to dig into archives for me and started to find articles that came out in 1990. So I think really leveraging your local library, your local university, going to the newspaper and just expressing your interest in that particular case and then digging through those archives, man, that really set up the timeline for me. It sort of it took it from family stories to something that was journalistically documented. I was able to say, okay, this is what happened on this day. This is what was announced to the media on this day. And it really helped set up at least the buckets so that when I went to go do interviews with people, I was able to then say, okay, about this article, can you give me more details on the nuance of this particular fact? So that was a huge part of it. And then secondly, it was just having conversations with people that were around at the time. When you have something that is traumatic or influential to a town, I'm amazed at how vivid people's memories are back to a time that was 27 years ago. Mm-hmm. We went to a baseball game at Mississippi State. And I wanted to go sit in Betty's seat, like the seat that she sat in, that she had season tickets to. And we were sitting there, and I noticed that some people sat in front of us who you could tell had been there a long time. They were older people, and I just kind of tapped one of them on the shoulder, and I said, "Did you happen to be friends with Betty Jones?" And the amount of emotion that instantly came to their faces was not only touching, but it was surprising because it was real to them. In that moment, they were transported back to 27 years ago, and we had a great conversation about Betty and how much she meant to them. And so I would say that just going up and talking to people and asking them about that particular instance, or specifically about those people, man, that can really get you this. That can really shed light to the bigger picture of the story.
That's great. And then the last part of the question was, how do you keep it all in order?
Yeah.
So it's so much information. How do you compile, organize, and make it, something where you can easily get to what you need and not just be a big jumbled mess?
Yeah. So with that also, I have a couple of different things. One, just from a technical side, I use Dropbox and really try to organize things into folders. And that way, I have a team of people that are helping me, and I'm able to send them links to those specific folders. And that way we can start to work with that information a lot quicker. But that aside, a huge shout out to my mom. My mom has helped immensely with going through hours of interviews and articles, and she has sort of become an encyclopedia for me. Like, I can call her and ask her, hey, have you read anything about this really specific thing? And she's able to recall, oh yeah, that's in that interview with so-and-so, or that's in the article from November of 1990. And it's immensely helpful. So, if you can find someone, it's just really hard. For me, it's very hard to be an objective storyteller and a historian. Now, some people can do it. Some people can kind of keep all of that in their head at the same time. But I am so grateful for a team that is taking different aspects of the production and helping me sort of get through that so that I can focus on how do we roll out this story in a way that is compelling and meaningful to those of you that are giving of your time to listen. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. While living in Ethiopia, some friends of mine witnessed firsthand the consequences of extreme poverty. They saw how Ethiopian women, in an effort to provide for themselves and their families, were forced to make unthinkable choices just to survive. These friends realized they wanted to give these women another choice, one that would provide them the opportunity to earn a living. It was from this experience that Fashionable was born. This movement started with a collection of hand-woven scarves, of which my wife has many, and has grown to include handmade leather bags and jewelry, apparel, shoes, and most recently, a premium denim line, lovingly crafted by women who have overcome extraordinary circumstances. We're so honored to partner with Fashionable and offer our listeners 15% off their first order. Go to livefashionable.com and use the discount code KNOCK15 at checkout. Again, visit livefashionable.com today to help bring opportunity and choice to these amazing women.
All right, so we've got a few more questions we're going to go through. Christine from Ontario asks,
Hi, Jason. It's Christine calling from Ontario, Canada. I just finished episode 1. I want to say what a great job. I'm hooked. My question is, how long had Betty been staying with Catherine, and was it well known that she was there? Thank you, and keep up the great work.
Well, first of all, I want to thank our friends in Canada for listening. That's really awesome. You think about when you're doing this, Simon, I don't know if you've seen a lot of these people that have been giving comments, but it's been crazy to me to see how many people from all over the country and all over the world that are engaging with this story.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten bigger than Mississippi or even Tennessee, where we're at.
Yeah, and that's what, when we started this, that was the thing that was the most compelling to me was, there is this interest in finding justice for cold cases, and it's really unique right now. I mean, when we were growing up, we would watch shows like Unsolved Mysteries or America's Most Wanted, which obviously is close to us. And you would have an episode where they would roll out a story in a few minutes, but then I feel like that news cycle would end and then you would move on with your lives. I think what's really special right now in this particular time with podcasts is there's an ability to there's an ability to reach out to listeners and roll out a story over episodes that they can actually engage and involve themselves in. And I think that's what these questions and answers, it's really special about them, because those TV shows we watched when we were a kid, if we had a question about that particular episode, there was really no way to engage the creators.
Yeah, you're stuck talking to your family members about it in the living room.
Yeah, like water cooler conversations the next day about that particular case. And what's really cool with what we're doing, and why I think that it can actually make a difference, is we're making an episode, we're releasing it to a group of listeners who passionately care about it, and then we give an opportunity for those listeners to call in and ask questions. And that's why I think this is a really special format, and I'm optimistic that we can find justice for Betty and Catherine using this medium. So to get back to her question, I don't know exactly when she got there. We're going to roll out a little bit of that in an interview that's coming up with Catherine's son, Shep. He talks a little bit about the circumstances as to why Betty was there. I know for sure from our episode 1 that Steve Davis, who was a pastor of Betty, said that he had seen Betty at Kroger at 5 o'clock that evening. Mm-hmm. And so I imagine she was getting food for Catherine, or getting something for their evening. What I do know is that she was there with her that evening, and that she was sharing responsibility with another lady to go and sit with Catherine over the Labor Day weekend. So the Labor Day weekend, obviously it's a holiday, and her regular caretaker had other things that she wanted to do. She was going to go spend time with her family over this weekend. And so Betty and another lady were trading off sitting with Catherine, because they were all friends. That's one of the things that I'm realizing, is that Starkville was a really small town, and there was this really close-knit community. I always thought, the way that it was rolled out to me was that Betty was a deaconess in her church, and I just kind of assumed that she was just doing community service. She was just going to sit with this lady who was homebound.
Like a community elderly program.
Right, exactly, yeah. But what I found out is that that's not... that might have been part of the case, but that Betty and Catherine were friends. Yeah. Like, they knew each other. The Kriglers and the Joneses / Throwers had done life together. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't just a stranger sitting with a stranger. They had history together. And I think that's why it impacted Catherine so much when she learned of Betty's passing, because they had a relationship. And so I don't know exactly when she had got there, but I know that she was trading off sitting with Catherine over that weekend. But I hope to find out more specific timeline as we get into deeper interviews.
Definitely. Sarah Beth from Alabama asks,
Hi. One of my questions has been throughout this case, I've followed it for years, and every time it pops up in the media, it doesn't appear as if they ever show the original sketch of the perpetrator in his 20s. I've only seen the age enhancement photo, and I'd like to see the original sketch of him in the 20s too. That might spark a memory of a former student or someone that might have known him then as well. So I guess my curiosity is, why hasn't the police released, or if they have, can we see that sketch too? Thank you for opening this back up, and good luck. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic question. One of the things that I'm going to be doing as we roll out episodes is I have a lot of resources that I have accumulated as I've done my research, and I'm going to knockknockpodcast.com and going and building a page for every episode that we make. So right now, if you go there and you go to episodes in the top navigation, you'll see episode 1, and in that there are some resources. For instance, there are the articles that we read on the episode, and in one of those articles from the Starkville Daily News is the original sketch that I think his name was Bunky Williams drew based on Catherine's description. And what's really crazy about it, and Simon, you've seen that sketch, it really looks like a grade school student drew it. Not to hate on the original artist, but what it told me when I saw it is how unprepared Starkville was for a crime like this.
Yeah.
I think you could tell that, like, and I'm just assuming this is not based on any testimony or any interview that I've had, but I imagine Catherine survives. Catherine begins to give a testimony, and within a few days, they had this sketch out. And I imagine they were scrambling. Hey, is there anyone that can draw a sketch? We need to find someone fast. One, because every day that goes by, the killer gets further and further away from the scene of the crime. Secondly, they probably didn't know how long Catherine had. I mean, Catherine was in really bad shape. And so if you look at the sketch, it's really rough. It's really, really rough. I mean, it genuinely could be any male with short hair on Earth.
Yeah.
And that's what's really cool about, and we'll get into this more in the next episode, is when America's Most Wanted got involved in 1993, they, with their larger resources, made a sketch based on the original description that is much more lifelike. And so in episode 2, continue to go to knockknockpodcast.com, and for every episode, I'll start to put more and more of those things that I have. I wish that I could post the America's Most Wanted television show, but unfortunately 20th Century Fox wants money for their intellectual property, and we don't have the resources to post that. I have a screener, which has been really great for research purposes, but unfortunately that episode isn't online. But I will post, in our next episode, I'll post a progression of the sketches. The first sketch, the America's Most Wanted sketch, and the Age Progress sketch that they did in around 2015.
That'd be great. All right, next, Jason C. asks.
Yes, I had a question. I understand that there was 2 ladies who were murdered, but in the first episode, there was a lady that was being interviewed or talked to in the hospital that was the lady who called 911, or maybe a witness to the murder. Is this the other woman who was killed? Did she just die later from her injuries, or just a little confused on that? Thanks so much. Enjoy the podcast. Keep up the good work. Thanks.
Yeah, that's right. The name of the podcast is Knock Knock: The Unsolved Murders of Betty Jones and Catherine Krigler. Betty Jones was our step grandmother, and Catherine Krigler was the other lady who eventually died from her injuries, and it was ruled a homicide. So episode 2, the title of it is going to be the Labor Day murders, because that's what these crimes are known of. To this day, the infamous Labor Day murders in Starkville, Tennessee. And so the Labor Day murders are the murder of Betty Jones and Catherine Krigler. Although Catherine didn't die on the scene like Betty did, she did eventually, unfortunately, die from her injuries. And she was, as we mentioned earlier, she was raped and very brutally assaulted, and she just never recovered. It's really special. I've grown very close with the Krigler family, and we'll talk a little bit about how that happened. It's a crazy story how we met the Kriglers. Yeah. I've gotten close to both Catherine's granddaughter Juki, who you hear from in episode 1, and also her son and daughter-in-law, and we're going to get to hear from them. I think Simon, and you can relate with this. Growing up, we always knew that Betty had been killed with another lady, but until I got married, I didn't know anything about Catherine Krigler. She was just an anonymous.
The other woman who was there.
Yeah, she was just sort of a character in this story that we had always heard. And man, it's been so special because of this podcast to learn not only about how Catherine died. Obviously, we need to know about that so that we can, start to so that we can start finding justice for her murder. But it's been really great to not only know how she lived, but also know the family members, her legacy, the legacy that she instilled in her son and her granddaughter. And that's what's really cool about this, right? Like, when we get done with this podcast, man, I am so hopeful that we find justice for Betty, right? That's the whole reason we're doing it. But if nothing else happens, we're documenting stories about these two wonderful women, and we're getting to know Betty more. We're getting to know Catherine more. And we're also getting to know the people that they left behind and the legacy that they sowed into these friends and family members. And so, man, I'm just really excited to continue to dig in, because one of the things I think I said in the last episode, Simon, you could tell me how you feel about this, but the more that we learn about Betty, she comes to life a little bit more for us, because, that's a grandmother that I got to know a little bit, but that you didn't get to know at all.
Yeah.
And so it's cool to hear those stories, because you get to know what she was like,
Yeah, I agree. It is like, I'm sure the people listening, many of them probably have relatives that passed when they were children, or maybe before they were born. And at some point, you grow up and you start to wonder, who am I? Who are my ancestors? Who came before me? What did they do? Why did their lives matter? What were some of their experiences? And that's what it's been kind of more for me, is understanding who this person was. Because really all that I have are very brief flashes of memories of being in Starkville or interacting with Mama Betty. Certainly not normal start to finish kind of memories that you may have.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. Definitely has brought her more and more to life for me. Hearing the firsthand accounts from the people who lived through this, who suffered the most from it and were impacted the most. So certainly we hope to get to know her some more, get to learn new things about her, feel a little bit closer to her, since we never had the opportunity to grow up with her.
Sure. Simon, tell me a couple of ways that people can really engage the Knock Knock community. If someone's listening to this or really loved episode 1, what are ways that they can get involved?
Well, we've certainly got the Facebook page, which if you haven't already, we'd really appreciate it if you follow the page and leave us a comment. But there's also a closed Facebook group. Now, it's not closed out of secrecy. We're certainly not plotting anything in private. We just wanted it to be reserved for those very interested in the case, in the podcast, and be a space for people to connect with one another and do that in a closed group without other distractions, right? There's also, of course, our Twitter and our Instagram, which you can follow us there. And, of course, I want to bring special attention to the website, because what we've set up at knockknockpodcast.com is a forum. And if you are one of those people who maybe stray away from social media, that's cool. We totally understand. This is a forum on our website where you can post questions, you can start a conversation, and you can do so in a forum thread or in a discussion that is related to what you're interested in. So, for example, if you have a general question, there's a spot for that. If you have a more specific question, then there's going to be a different spot for that. So we encourage you, if you haven't already, to check out the website, knockknockpodcast.com/discussion, and that'll take you directly to the page.
Awesome. Let's take one more quick break. If there's one thing I've learned about Betty through this process, it's that her life was dedicated to giving back. I know she would have loved organizations like Thistle Farms. At first glance, Thistle Farms is a world-class provider of natural home and body products. In the summer, their bug spray is a must. But what is truly amazing about these items are the people who make them. All of Thistle Farms products are lovingly crafted by women, survivors of trafficking, prostitution, and addiction. You see, beneath the surface, what Thistle Farms really is a place that provides safe housing, economic independence, and a strong community of advocates for these women. Take a minute to visit thistlefarms.org and learn more about this amazing organization. And while you're there, use the discount code KNOCK15 for 15% off your first order. That's thistlefarms.org, where love is the most powerful force for change in the world. Thank you so much for joining us for our first Q&A episode for episode 1 of the Knock Knock podcast. And thanks again, Simon, for coordinating all this communication. And I know that I mentioned this in one of our pre-production diaries. It's so special to me that that when people interact with us online, that it's not just a stranger, that it's a family member as well that can talk to people and engage them. And I'm just so thankful that you're there and participating in this mission.
You're welcome. Yeah, my pleasure. Glad to be part of the process.
To join the Knock Knock community, be sure and connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Knock Knock Pod. There you can ask questions, leave comments, or just say hi. We've also set up a voicemail at 1-888-57-BETTY. If you have comments or questions, or you'd like to be a part of the show, please call and leave a message. You can also rate and review the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you download podcasts. Reviews are key to keeping Knock Knock on the chart, where people can find our show. Knock Knock is produced by Chris Cerrone and me. Special thanks to the Knock Knock team: Lacey Arcioli, Rebecca Jones, Jason Adams, Simon Jones, Cole Flynn, Colleen Jones, and Maggie Thomas. We'll be back on Tuesday, September 19th with our next full episode, so please share the podcast with your friends and family. Thanks again for subscribing to the Knock Knock podcast.